I researched into the effects of gamification in our brains, and there are a lot of chemicals that are released in our brains, like endorphins, serotonin, like the happy chemicals, the ones that make us want to connect more. And this is what I wanted to bring to the workplace, because people that spend so much time together, they don't really know each other. And then we expect that, oh, I'm part of an organization now, I used to work there, and I'm from this country. And then you're supposed to collaborate with this person on a project, you're supposed to know how they work. We're just supposed to magically know about every single person in our career. But it just doesn't happen like this. What if we just dedicate a chunk of time to just get to know each other? I don't know, solve a Lego game together, or put on a blindfold and then ask people to guide us around the room. And then that builds trust, that builds leadership, that builds listening skills. And it's such a fun way to learn all of those things. If we do this the straightforward way, people will be like, I need to say the right thing, otherwise, I don't know, my manager is listening and I have to be one certain way. So which use cases are the strongest and which use cases are the low-hanging fruits?
So for those that are listening and maybe don't know what the word actually means, could you tell us what gamification actually means?
Yeah. So gamification is adding game-like elements to non-game environments. So the game-like elements can be what we see in video games, for example, like leaderboards, points, rewards, badges, and then you introduce it to an environment that is not supposed to be a game, like a business process, a website, an application. And that encourages engagement and participation because it's more interactive, it's more fun. And it can also happen in many forms. Like, I think most people will think, oh, gamification is like this, I don't know, scavenger hunt that I did with my company, or this quiz I solved in this application process. But it can also be an icebreaker in a team meeting, or it can be, I don't know, a brainstorming activity where you just put post-its in a big whiteboard and then you just go around the room and discuss. So it's more like, how do we turn a process that can be quite mundane, repetitive, and just make it more fun?
And companies are using this a lot at the moment, right?
I think it starts to be more and more popular. This is what I've seen, yeah.
So is there a scientific approach as to why companies are implementing gamification?
I think there is a scientific approach to gamification from a perspective of what happens in our brain when we play, and then also what happens socially. So I researched into the effects of gamification in our brains, and there are a lot of chemicals that are released in our brains, like endorphins, serotonin, like the happy chemicals, the ones that make us feel better about ourselves, make us want to connect more. So when we play, we feel better. We want to engage with other people more. We feel safer. And then also from a social perspective, when we also do it with other people, that makes us feel part of a group, like the feeling of we're in this together. And then it also makes us feel less self-aware because we're just doing the same thing with other people. So it's not like, oh, I'm doing something that is not professional, or it's not serious enough, or I will be judged, because it's a safe setting. It's like you cannot be criticized for what you're doing because everybody else is doing it. So there's actually a base behind it. And I think a lot of people might be aware of it, but it's not like really out there, right? But it does exist. Like, you really feel better. You want to engage with people. You want to talk to people. You're more open to experience. So it really does help.
So we'll talk about more of a business or work setting with using gamification, but how is it used in recruitment? Because I'm really curious about it. Me and my company are looking to implement it, but we don't know like where to begin. Is it can you put it in every stage of the process, or do we have to select?
Yeah, I think it can be added in basically every step, but it can also be included for both the candidate and the recruiter. So I think some examples that I can bring is, for example, the most obvious one is during the application process. So adding like a quiz for how much do you know about the company, or I think some companies like Albert Heijn or Marriott Hotels, they're doing a game-like scenario where people just are part of a kitchen in the hotel, or part of the supermarket in Albert Heijn, and they kind of do a role play while answering questions. It can also be part of a personality test. So I've seen, for example, other companies do like a treasure hunt, or you're being in an island and then you just go around the island and then answer personality questions. So I think this is the most obvious and the one that has been used quite the most. But then if we want to dig deeper, it can also be part of, for example, the interview process. So A recruiter can be something like, oh, you know what, let's do a role play. Imagine that you are this person, I'm this person, and this is the situation. What would you do? So this can also be gamification, because I think people have in mind that, oh, gamification needs to be something extra. It needs to be something like we need to come up with a new software or a new platform, and it can be so much complex, but it can also be these like tiny, tiny incremental changes that makes the experience more fun. And then also in the selection process, like the recruiters can have like a leaderboard or something like a scoreboard where you assess based on a number of criteria. And then at the end, you make kind of an incentive between all of you. And then that also increases the connection within the team. So I think it can be very simple. And as long as it's intentional, I think this is something that I would like to highlight, that it needs to be part of the process rather than we just do it because it's trendy or because it's fun.
Yeah, and I've also seen it in onboardings that you can do like an onboarding game
Yeah.
kind of
I think
session.
it can be, I think for me, gamification can be included in as many processes as you want to see fit. So some common use cases that I discuss is onboarding, of course. And I think onboarding, there some companies that don't really pay attention to the social element. And I think gamification can be a really strong use case in that. So how do you bring people together, and especially people that have not been in your company, they don't know their teammates, they don't know anybody, and they feel so shy, maybe and insecure, and they want to be part of the team, but they don't know how. So I think a team building part or an icebreaker or an energizer when you're doing the induction can really, really help. And I've seen it happening in organization, and it's just such a whole different experience because the person just feels part of the team immediately
Yeah.
with just an icebreaker, and then everybody just feels just better. And I think also what I've seen besides onboarding is also in processes like goal setting. So if a company wants to come up with a new way to, I don't know, set a process or come up with goals for the new year or set up a new way of working, brainstorming can be easily gamified. Like, for example, I have this a game that I really like to play called The World's Most Stupid Factory. And the scenario goes like this, that a factory somewhere in the world produced 100 left shoes. So now they cannot sell them as a pair of shoes, so they need to find another way to sell them. So the group needs to find 100 ways that this shoe can be used different than its original purpose.
Right.
And that, apart from the fact that, you just really scramble to find 100 ways to use a left shoe, it can also help the group to just get their creative juices flowing, think innovatively, think outside of the box. And it's just such a nice activity because everybody's like, oh, I didn't know that this can be used. And then people just create moments of connection, and then afterwards you can say, okay, so now that we get the creativity out there, let's focus on come up with different goals or come up with new ways of approaching this problem, and then it just goes so much smoother than that afterwards.
You've just given us so many ideas and examples as to how you can integrate it in the recruitment process and also when people are joining the company, but also for team building sessions. And I didn't realize how many of the things we were already doing, like brainstorming and stuff, are essentially gamification. Because even I thought like, oh, we would need to hire developers to make like some levels on the website or something like this for when people are applying. But it can be super simple. It can
Exactly.
just, yeah, you don't have to outsource it to make it something special. But then there's the other idea, because for me, it sounds amazing. I'm a gamer and I would totally be on board with that. But for some people, it could be overkill. It could be a bit too much, right?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the common pitfalls that I've seen people fall into. Like, I think when gamification is introduced, it can easily be seen as just a one-off thing or something that just doesn't quite fit. So I think people try to introduce something new and fun and exciting and extra, but it's just not integral within the culture or within how the company is portrayed. So if, for example, I go and apply into a company and then I see this, I don't know, go in a deserted island and answer personality questions, but then afterwards it's just super serious, super professional, and it's part of, I don't know, a company that just values really fast pace and a lot of workload, and just gamification is just not part of it in any other stage of the process or in the culture, then it just feels like, you just do it just to say that you did it. So I think how this can be avoided is to really start by looking in your culture. Like, do we, for example, value teamwork, or do we say that we want people to connect? Okay, this is the perfect way for gamification to facilitate that. But if you're a culture that is just not cut out for it, then maybe you need to first look through that and then make gamification something that your company can look at. Or, for example, if you start with gamification, you need to start smaller. So adding an icebreaker in the beginning of your team meeting. And then if that goes well, see how people react to it, and then maybe introduce it to an all hands. But then you need to make it part of the conversation, like that people that maybe they see it in a meeting, but then it continues through other processes as well. And I think also people should be quite familiar with it, because if you introduce an icebreaker or an energizer and you're not quite sure of how to introduce it, and you're not quite sure yourself, or you're not the most like familiar and natural person to play, then it can also feel a bit off. So I think I would encourage people to look at their culture, how they can be integrated, and how gamification can be part of the culture more integrally and organically. Then take small steps, but also make sure that the people leading gamification and facilitating are actually trained to be facilitators themselves. And if not, then they can outsource it, or they can take a little bit more time looking into, okay, what games can I play? And then maybe test it with a smaller group before bringing it to an all hands. And then it just becomes easier and easier. And then afterwards, you can take it to a bigger thing, like organizing a team event or a company event with gamification, or doing a team building day, or completely change the process with gamification. But it needs to start smaller.
Yeah. And where does it come from then? Would it come from the TA team, HR? I guess learning and development, right, would be the natural team that it would go to.
I think it can come from anywhere, honestly. I think every part of the HR world, L&D, TA, they have really strong use cases to introduce gamification. For me, it would be the person who is more natural to facilitate or to lead. So I think it's just an initiative that can come from different people, and then find which use cases are the strongest and which use cases are the low-hanging fruits, how we can start with something that is quite easy and not complex, and also has quite a small impact and doesn't really affect our way of working and processes. And then if people feel comfortable with it, then it can be anywhere in the organization. It can also be that, I don't know, an engineering manager just is really gifted at facilitating, so they can also do it for their team. But I think it also needs to be distributed in the organization, because if it comes from just one department, and then this department does not have ambassadors within other teams, it can also feel like, oh, it's just something that they do, or it's just something that they make us do, but we're not really sure how to do it in our own teams. But if you start with something that works in one team, and then make sure that all of the teams are following the same pattern and the same rhythm, then it can also feel like, this is our company's way of working instead of our team's way of working.
Yeah. And I can imagine that if you do roll this out across the company, it would bring people so much closer together, right? Because majority of people, grow up on video games or like playing games on their phones. So they're accustomed to it, like they're happy to like jump on board with it. But some people, like you said, could be more introverted and a bit more reluctant to do this at work, right? Because you don't know what's the right, for example, if it's like an icebreaker, or you have to say 2 truths, 1 lie, that's also a game, right? You're a bit afraid, like, shit, how far can I go with that? Like, what can my lie be?
Exactly. And I think that it's almost a paradox, because when we grow up, we just naturally play games and we're just so easy with it. But enter a workplace, and gamification can also be seen as, something that is not professional enough, something that is not serious enough, something that is just a distraction. And why do we do this? And people feel a bit more reserved, because if it's an environment that is not really encouraging this kind of behaviors, or encouraging a safe space to express, then people can also feel like, if I do this, then I will be judged, or I'm a manager, I need to set the example and I need to be more serious. So I think people naturally forget how to play when they enter the workplace. And I really believe that, if we bring up this lost innocence of when we were kids and we're just playing, we didn't care, we just like act silly and nothing was happening because we are kids. And then if we just adopt just a tiny part of this in the workplace, things can really, really change. Because then what I also try to do when I'm doing a team building day or organize a gamification workshop for different companies is I want to start by making sure that everyone feels safe to express themselves. So it's not gonna be like, okay, now we're gonna do this race and then everybody will run and sweat and then like people will not participate. So you start them with really, really small games, something that is like easy to do, and also looking at how people are comfortable to share. And then at the end, then you introduce more elements that will be more challenging. So it needs to be very thoughtful and intentional how you take people along in this journey.
Yeah, and what you've touched on as well, like the innocence of being a child. I think that also, you can take that outside of the actual team building or the gamification process you have, right? I reckon you can actually bring that into your work and be more your authentic self, right? Like you said, we normally put this mask that we're super professional and people will take us seriously if we are this person when we come to work. But I really believe that if you're like a child, right? Like very curious, you're open to explore new things, you're willing to find out the solution to a problem in any way possible and work with others and bring them together and stuff and work as part of a team. I think you can actually achieve more with that mindset, with that curious, open-minded mindset. So I think gamification actually opens doors internally and it lets people see work as a different place, right? Instead of it being so serious in a place that you just clock in at 9, you sit at your desk with your headphones in, and then you fuck off home after 5 or 6.
Yes, exactly. And I've seen how teams can change. And what my motivation was to bring this to the workplace is the changes that I was seeing in groups when I was volunteering or when I was in high school or university. And what I was doing at the time was bringing a group of strangers together because this group of strangers needed to accomplish a task. So let's say that we are in an event and we're volunteers and we need to serve people or help with the organization, but then we don't really know each other. So how are we supposed to communicate, collaborate, and solve challenges that might come up? So what happened then was that there was an intentional time where we dedicated to team building, going through a series of games and activities that would increase how well we know each other, how well we communicate, how well we listen to each other, how we take feedback, if we trust each other, and whether we can solve problems. So there's a series of very intentional layers of games and activities. And then at the end, it's just what happens is really magical. Like people from strangers become a really well-knit team. And this is what I wanted to bring to the workplace because I find it so interesting, let's say it the least, that people that spend so much time together, they don't really know each other. And then we expect that, oh, I'm part of an organization now, I'm part of a team. Hey, this is my name. This is what I used to do. We do this small chit chat of, oh, I used to work there and I'm from this country and this is how long I live in this country. And then you're supposed to collaborate with this person on a project. You're supposed to know how they work, how they like to be approached, how they like to receive feedback, how they give feedback, how to resolve conflict with this person if it arises. And then we're just supposed to magically know about every single person in our career. But it just doesn't happen like this. And I think companies do not know how to solve these problems. And then HR comes into place and then it's like, oh, employee relations department that they need to bring people together and just talk it out. But I'm like, what if in the beginning of onboarding, or what if during a team day or during a team process, we just dedicate a chunk of time to just get to know each other, to maybe, I don't know, solve a Lego game together, or, I don't know, put on a blindfold and then ask people to guide us around the room. And then that builds trust, that builds leadership, that builds listening skills. And it's just is such a fun way to learn all of those things. And then when they do that in such a safe setting that they're not judged or criticized, because it's not work. It's not like, oh, we're doing a workshop on feedback. So if we do this the straightforward way, people will be like, I need to say the right thing. Otherwise, I don't know, my manager is listening and the HR is listening and I have to be one certain way. But if you do a gamification part of feedback of, we're doing an activity where, for example, we discuss a possible scenario. Like I have this game called the plane wreck. And then there's a group of people that I say, okay, so you're part of a plane crew, and then your plane crashes in a desert, and you have 10 minutes to go into the plane and select 5 items to help you with your survival. And then after 10 minutes, the plane explodes, and then you do not get to select anything else. So first they say, okay, this is the list. You need to select 5 items on your own. And then after this 1-2 minutes to yourself, then you need to discuss as a group and you need to come to a consensus which 5 items you would choose. And this really interesting, simple scenario just brings up so many things in a group setting, because you will have people with loud voices. People will be like, okay, these are the 5 items. This is my way. This is my approach. I'm not doing anything else. You will have people that will be like, I don't care enough. I will just go with the flow. You have people who will really be very opinionated for a certain item, and then people will disagree. And then how do you solve this? Because you have 10 minutes and you need to all agree, like everybody needs to actively agree. And then afterwards, you just unpack, what happened? How did was your opinion heard? Were you free and safe to express your opinion? What did you think that the group, how the group reacted when you heard your opinion? So there's so many things that you unpack from this. And then afterwards, you say, okay, so this is what we discovered about this scenario. How do we translate this in a work setting? And it's just so much more powerful, because people really, really express themselves in this setting, but they will not express the same way if you just say, so in this project, this is what happened. How do we give feedback in this company?
Yeah.
It will not be the same. So I really believe that in a more indirect, safe, non-work related way, things are more impactful and they lead to the same conclusions and the same results, but in a much safer, engaging, and fun way.
This is really important, what you've been touching on, because you see this all the time where companies are like, I need someone yesterday. I need someone right now. And there's basic onboarding, right? Like have one-on-ones with the team, etc. But like you said, they just dive into the work and they're expected to just collaborate with strangers, essentially, right? 8 hours a day. And doing something like this, taking the time to actually do a team building at the beginning, it could take a day, right? This would actually save so much hassle and so much trouble in the future, right? And people can just foster collaboration straight away. And it also ties in with diversity and inclusion, right? If people are from different backgrounds or they've just relocated to that country and they don't know anyone, they're just expected they're popped into a team and they're just expected to work together and know how the other person likes to work, right? It's just crazy. So this just makes complete sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's sort of, you go into an environment, you go on autopilot, and we have been hearing so much about how do we bring a more inclusive culture and we make sure that everyone feels comfortable. But then my question is, okay, tangibly, how do you do that? Just, of course, you need to open up conversations and you need to hear perspectives, but I think it's just such a better way to dedicate one day. And I mean, companies do that anyway. Like they do team days, they do company events. So how about instead of, I don't know, go into a room and just have everybody and then we talk about stuff like, okay, these are the targets, these are our celebrations of successes, and you can totally do that. But how about dedicating also some time for people to get to know each other? Because afterwards, I've seen it so many times that after these events, when people get to know each other, like afterwards, they have so much more connection moments. Like you have this reference point of, oh yeah, I know that you like snails, for example, because in the last team building event we did, we had to share some facts about each other, and then I learned that you like snails and I like snails, and then you just open a whole new conversation about your snail love, for example. And you would not normally do that because my also sometimes the feedback that I get is like, yeah, but we already like spend time together because we're in the office and we just go for coffees together. But and I'm like, yes, that is true. But if you have an environment that is just for team building, people will be more intentional with it. I'm in the water cooler, I have a million things in my mind because I'm also working and I also need to get to the next meeting and I also need to talk to this colleague for this particular task, and your mind is not in it. And you also feel a bit more stressed when you're around people, and the talk will be much smaller than if you just dedicate a full day and then you just know that I'm just here to socialize and I'm here to feel good about myself and I'm here
Yeah.
to get to know my colleagues. And it's also like something that doesn't pressure you because you're not expected to perform. You're not expected to act a certain way. You're not expected to find the solution to a problem. You're just expected to be there, voice your opinion, participate, and have fun. And just afterwards, there's so many more things coming out of it, because I think gamification has been seen as a way to, of course, engage with candidates, with employees, with customers, but it can also be seen as a way to effectively train people, or to for people to retain information, or to people to work better together, to collaborate, to communicate in a way that everyone feels included, to give feedback. And these use cases, I don't think that have been touched upon really, really often, because we have a very specific way of gamification. And my approach is more like, okay, there's gamification, which is, I don't know, the quizzes and the leaderboards and the competitions and the scavenger hunts that can be also be done in the office, but also virtually. That's something new that we have seen. But it can also be something that, a team building day or a company event or a workshop that we try to find, for example, how many common traits we have as individuals. And the value of it cannot be, I don't know, measured in money maybe. And I think that's the quite more difficult way to persuade the company to accept this kind of events. But I think it's kind of the same as learning, because you cannot really measure learning, or you cannot really measure training, but you see the long-term effects in a more subtle ways in the future. But if I think my biggest way of convincing people is just try it and see for yourself. And I have many, many examples of companies that I've done these events and I've done these team building days, and how they changed afterwards, like how much better they communicate, how much better they felt safe to share feedback. So it really, really works, but you have to see it for yourself, and you have to start small, and you have to see the reaction of people when you actually do an icebreaker in a team meeting. And then afterwards it becomes way easier, and then it's just part of your company's DNA.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, the cost tends to be a topic that pops up when arranging such events, right? Company wide or just for a team, because it can be quite expensive. But also, some companies think it's just putting a Nintendo Switch in the office, or we have like a mini golfing course in the office. And I think nobody really uses it because they think maybe subconsciously, oh, people might think I'm slacking off, right? Because I had it at my previous company where there was like a pool table, was it foosball table? There was so much, right, entertainment in that common room. And if you're playing the PlayStation or something, you're looking at a screen. Of course, it's competitive, etc., but you're not really understanding the other person. You're not getting to know them in this type of scenario, right?
Exactly.
So I think some companies think gamification is like that, just plopping some stuff in the office and hoping people just, pick up the golf club and start playing together.
Exactly.
But people are conscious about, like you said, I'm at the water cooler, I'm at the coffee machine, like it is work. I'm here to do tasks, right?
Yeah.
I'm here to do work. So it could be perceived as like I'm a slacker, or I'm just, doing anything to avoid going to meetings and stuff.
Absolutely.
So I think that was also important to touch on. But like you've mentioned, so you've seen other companies implementing it. You're implementing it at your current company at the moment, right?
Yes.
As
So
well?
I had I'm having the pleasure to also being able to test this in rituals with my team or with other teams. But I also started in my own company a few months ago. So I also go to other companies and organize team days for them. And I always start from, okay, what is the challenge? What is the goal here? Because I think something that I would like to briefly highlight is that one of the pitfalls of gamification is just, oh, we do it because it's fun or because it's trendy. But if it's if it's aligned with a goal, or if there's a purpose, or if there's something that we want to accomplish, then it just becomes much more impactful. So that's why, for example, when I go into a company, I start with, okay, what is the challenge right now? What do you want to accomplish? What is gamification serving you? And after that, then I design team building days for other companies.
That's amazing that you've started your own business around it as well. You're so passionate about gamification. And with the feedback you've been receiving then, has it been perceived well with the companies, or is it like another step in the recruitment process or in the team buildings?
Yeah, I think the reactions have been really, really interesting, because what I'm trying to do, I have been testing it a lot when I was volunteering or when I was in university settings. So in environments that are more safe. So I found that the method there was really, really impactful. And then fast forward to where I was working, when I was seeing, I don't know, boring meetings, or people like going into conflict mode, or people just not being able to work together, or when I was just feeling a little bit outside and not really connected to my colleagues, I was like, wait, but these things happens all the time, and I just feel the frustration and the lack of advancing in a project, but I know a solution to it. So that's what drove me to start my own business and to bring this to different companies. And of course, when starting with this new method where people need to change something, of course, everybody will be more hesitant and more resistant to this change, and they will question it a lot. So when I was in volunteering settings, then people will not question it because, oh, it's fun, we just do it. So they're more open to experience. But companies are much more, okay, so what is the purpose, and why do you do what you do, and why this game over this game? So I think they're more inquisitive as to what is the deeper meaning between what I'm doing, because my approach is also not to have a very set idea of how the day is going to go, because I'm really sensitive to group dynamics and the energy in the room. So I have this list of potential games, but then I start with one, and then I'm like, okay, so this group needs more energy, or this group has a lot of energy and we need to tone it down. So I don't follow a script. I always adapt to what the team needs. And sometimes it happens that, for example, I had this experience when in a previous company where I go into the room and everybody's just so full of energy and they want to talk and they want to interact with each other and have so much fun. And then the end goal was, how do we facilitate feedback sharing within the team? So I could already see that we have some people that are really loud and they're really like, I want to express my opinion and I want to be heard, and I will dominate the room. And then you have also people that also want to speak but don't feel really comfortable, or they feel overpowered by these loud voices. So in this setting, I would introduce some games that bring the energy down, or for example, give this more leadership role to the quiet voices so that we can silence for a little bit the loud voices. And then everybody just sees, oh, this conversation just goes way smoother than the game before. So what happened? So at the end, it was more like, okay, so why did we do the things that we did? So that's something that I received as a feedback, just to really explain what was the intended outcome of doing this activity over this activity. And at the end, I think that they said that they also did another training event with another company, but it was more boring, let's say, or they didn't see the value of it. But this time it was much more engaging, it was much more fun, and it really led to a lot of things that they will remember, because that the day that they did with the other company was just, okay, this is a one-off, we discuss about feedback, gone. But in this day we said, oh, but we had this scenario, or we did play this game, and then we remember and we go back to it and we just discuss, and it's just much more powerful. And so that was the first feedback that I received. And then afterwards, I did 2 more with virtual teams, which was also something new for me, because I'm so used to do in-person, face-to-face team building days, because it's just so much easier and you can do so much more things when people just are present in a room. But in virtual settings, I think it can also be done, but in a different way. So I had to adjust my approach at this. And the use cases in these particular scenarios was, we work remotely, so we want to feel more connected. How do we facilitate that? So after that, the feedback was that we feel much more connected. Like we don't, like virtual team building works. And I think that was the aha moment of, oh, we can still feel connected, we can still play games, we can still interact with each other over a screen, and it's just as powerful as if we did it in the office.
Yeah.
So that's also, I think, change in mindset that I want people to experience themselves and then say, oh, if I experience it myself, then I can also introduce it to the company, I can introduce it to the team, and then just cascades.
First of all, kudos, because clearly you're doing something right. If the company already did a training with a previous organization, didn't work out, and yours was much more interactive. Virtual environments. This is something that I really, really want to talk about because, for example, not just team buildings, but how do you engage with a global team, for example, if you are presenting for an hour? Because some people just use it as like a calendar filler, right? And then you clearly see them looking at something else and they're doing admin, just catching up on their other work. Could you give us an example, like one or two, that has been effective with, for example, presentations, how to engage so many people virtually?
Yeah. I think it starts with being very intentional about the games, activities, and things that you select to do in these meetings, and then structure it in a way that you also listen to your audience. Because I think one of the most common mistakes that I've seen in presentations is that, the presenter just comes from their own position and they present, and then the use case that they present just makes total sense to them, and they can totally street the contribution and the value of what they're presenting, but then they don't put themselves in the shoes of a person that has been staring at the screen or a PowerPoint for an hour. So I think that's also one of the tricks of facilitation, because if you're an experienced facilitator, you also understand that, I have a room and I have people that do not learn the same way, do not engage the same way, are not as interested in this subject as the person next to them. So being mindful of all these different changes in your audience, you can really tailor your presentation, because, whatever you're presenting, even if you're the most compelling storyteller, keeping an audience attention for an hour is just a tall task on its own. So I think, first of all, what I would do was to, of course, start with an icebreaker or an energizer, something that will get people talking, or get people to interact with each other. So whatever the intention of the team meeting is. So if, for example, you want to encourage people to speak or to participate or to write in the chat, then introduce an activity that does just that. And then people will be much more relaxed and much more confident, much more open to do all of those things because they already did it in a safer setting as that of the game. And then just be mindful that you need to engage your audience on multiple stages of your presentation. So if you're presenting something, address a question to your audience. It can also be something that people participate in the chat. If it's a bigger group, it can be something that, for example, you ask people to move. Like what I usually do is everybody with me? Okay, if you're with me, just, raise your right hand. Or maybe, for example, if it's already after one big topic and then you move to the next topic, you can do like something about, I will just put music now and then let's just, do a small choreography for 2 minutes and then we move on. So it's super interesting to see, okay, what you can leverage for yourself, because this is my approach, right? I don't expect that everybody will be as comfortable to ask 50 people to dance with them. So just do whatever feels natural for you, whatever you feel comfortable, see people's reaction. And then if you're not feeling comfortable yourself, ask for help. Maybe in the organization, there are people that have been trying this for a longer time than you, and they can give you ideas. Or, outside of your organization, do you have people that have been doing these practices for longer and they can give you ideas, or other providers or organization or facilitators, learning professionals, how do they engage their audience? So if you're just naturally curious of how you can elevate your presentation and your virtual meeting to be more engaging, then all the answers are out there. You just need to go out and look for them.
Yeah. So instead of just talking, because I see this a lot, to people like presenting and just reading off the slides and talking at the audience and expecting them to be engaged and listen, you have to just get them from the beginning, right? Get them engaged. What kind of, for example, if I'm presenting about, we're rolling out a new system, right? That sounds pretty dull, right? What kind of questions would you ask at the beginning as an icebreaker? Is it something totally unrelated to get people laughing, get people excited? Or does it have to be related to the topic to get them to think about
It
it?
can be either or. So I think the starting point should be, okay, so my presentation about the new system, is it because I want people to try? Is it because I want people to give feedback? Is it because I want people to get on board with it? So if, for example, you want people to give feedback, you need to get people talking. So do an energizer that people start sharing. So one idea could be, for example, something that I tried with my company a few months ago, is that, okay, I will say something that I like, and then if you also like it, you need to, I don't know, make a move like this or this, whatever, like get moving. And then someone else can unmute themselves and then they say something they like. And then if you also agree with this person, do the same move. And then everybody just goes around the room and then just talk and then participate and move. So that also gets the excitement going. So also how present you are in the meeting. Or if you want the energy to go up, you can also put music and say, okay, so now for the next 2 minutes, we just dance. The only thing that I would like to bring attention to is that if you're doing these things, also be mindful of what group you're addressing to. So if you're addressing a group of executives, maybe the dance part is not the best idea, or the move part. So be mindful of how comfortable people are to follow you in these activities. If you feel that people are not really ready to move or to act silly, you can also say, okay, so if you, I don't know, you like this, you can make a reaction in your Teams meeting. So it's the same game, but a different reaction and a much more safer reciprocation from your audience. And then once you get the audience, you can also think of your presentation instead of a one-way street to the two-way street. So again, what is your intended outcome? Do you want to get feedback? Do you want people to try? So if you want people to try, you can also make sure that you kind of gamify it. So split people in groups, create like a competition of, okay, we need to, for example, test this feature in this new system. Whoever finds this option first, then they win a point. And then you make a leaderboard within the different breakout rooms or subgroups. So I think I would encourage people to start thinking outside of the box. Like also think from the moment, okay, if I was participating in this event or this conference or this meeting, what would I want to see? How would you keep me? How would I like to be engaged? And also ask people, like get feedback, test things, and whatever works, try to do more of that. If something doesn't work, change your approach. But I think if you're curious as a mindset, then you will be led to the solution, and then you will find something that works for you.
Essentially, you need to put yourself in everyone else's shoes and think, what would engage me?
Yeah.
How would you get me to participate?
Yeah.
What about people who are notorious for turning the cameras off? I can imagine that's challenging. I see that quite often in meetings as well. They just don't want to put their cameras on or anything.
Exactly. And I think that also comes back to, okay, what is your culture? What is your standard way of working? And then build on that. Because if you're like, okay, so we have a series of 10 meetings, and then in these 10 meetings, this person does not open their camera, you cannot expect that, oh, now I'm doing an energizer, and then I expect this person to turn on the camera, and then if they don't, then it's a failure. But you didn't make it inorganic, you didn't make it integral. And then if you just say, okay, now we're going to play an energizer and you need to open the camera, you put them on the spot and they need to act a certain way, and then it will not work. So I think it needs to start before introducing something new, just to work with what you have and make people feel more and more comfortable to share. So why people should open their camera? Do you interact with them? Or for example, you can work slightly differently and more slowly and say, okay, so if your camera is off, I mean, we would love to see you, but if you don't feel comfortable, or if there's something else that prevents you from showing your lovely face, you can react like this. And then in the next meeting, you can say, okay, so for this exercise, I need 5 minutes with you to seeing your face, because we will do this exercise. I want everyone to just give me 5 minutes, and then you can go back to being in your off. So just take people with you along this journey. So I think this is the most important things. And of course, there is not one solution that fits everything, but it just means that you need to really look at how is it that you work currently, and then introduce incremental changes that also make people feel, okay, so I tried this differently and it feels nice. And then now I want to open my camera because we're playing these fun games that I have to expect in every single team meeting. So I want to be part of it. So the best case scenario is that they will feel compelled to open their camera because they want to be part of the game. But if it doesn't happen, then just take it slowly, and then make sure that also people feel part of this journey with you.
Yeah, I was going to say, so what if then there's high expectations, right? If you introduce this to the team and then they think, oh, okay, I'm going to put my camera on next time because this is really fun. Is it tough to just keep the momentum going and keep doing this? Or do you have to take breaks from gamification because it can be too much? Because I can imagine I would want to do it all the time personally because I feel like we're on the same kind of level. We're very energetic. It gives us energy. We like to interact with other people. But to set that standard every time for every presentation, team building, it can be a bit exhausting, right? Especially if it's just one person always hosting or always coordinating it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it can also be adapted to the needs of the team or the company or the setting. So it doesn't have to always be there. I think it's important to show up in different kinds of meetings or events of the company, but in different forms so that people also feel interested, but also not burned out from having always the same icebreaker, always the same energizer. So you need to make people feel motivated. So, for example, a solution to not have the same person do this whole gamification activities on their own is to delegate, like bring people together. For example, a super easy way and super safe to start a team meeting is to, okay, so we will start with an icebreaking question. So, and then we will rotate. So we will say, okay, so this meeting, I come up with an icebreaking questions. We all go in turns answering that. The next meeting, I pass the torch to you. So you will be the responsible to find this question. So it can be something super simple and super easy and doesn't have to have a lot of effort back into it. And then, for example, in the next team event or the next company event, then we do something different. So instead of a question, we do something in breakout rooms. Or instead of making an energizer in the beginning of the meeting is, okay, how do we gamify giving feedback? Let's maybe introduce a tool like, I don't know, Mentimeter or something more interactive. And interaction can also be part of gamification. It doesn't always have to be that we play a game. It can also be an activity or organize our discussion in a different way so that people also feel that, oh, we do something different. Instead of saying, okay, give me feedback on this, maybe you can say, okay, how do you give me feedback? If you are really happy with it, then you need to react with this GIF. Or if you're not really happy with it, then react with this GIF. So just, be curious and be inquisitive as to how I can make this still interesting and motivating, but not doing the same thing and not overbore my audience. So yeah, you don't always have to have the same thing. I think it's important to have gamification show up in different forms throughout the journey of a team process or a team activity. But yeah, I think it's also listening to the needs of your team and see what they think. And also at some point, especially when you introduce something new, get feedback. Like, does it work? Does it not work? Do they want to see something different? And also ask people to take ownership. If they like what they're saying, but they want to do something different, ask them to also come up with something, like delegate, cascade this to all the organization. And then more and more people will be the facilitators or the energizers. And then it just goes naturally from there.
Influencing the others in the company. How do you collect feedback? Because I've also done some trainings and I find that a Google form doesn't go very far. People are very reluctant to fill it in, even if it's anonymous. Do you do live feedbacks with your sessions?
It can also be live feedback. I think for me it's important to also collect feedback on the go. So quantitative feedback, of course, in the form of fill out a Google form, or maybe you have a questionnaire at the end of the meeting that people can just react quickly to 2 to 3 questions, or you just collect feedback on the go. Like, if you enjoyed this meeting, react with a thumbs up. That can also serve something. Of course, if you want to be more structured with your feedback, it needs to be a bit more intentional, to have more questions. But it can also be qualitative. So ask people around. Maybe you can have people from different places of the organization, that maybe you have also someone that is super extroverted and they really enjoy, but also make sure that you also ask someone who is not that extroverted, or maybe they're not that familiar with gamification. So asking from opinions from different spectrums of extroversion or openness to experience, or different departments or different teams, can also serve as maybe, okay, do I go to the right direction or not? And then if you want to measure if the training that you did or this technique that you tried is more is actually effective, then yeah, you need to do it in the forms of feedback. But also if you introduce a form, make it engaging, like make it as if, for example, okay, if I also receive a form in my email 3 days after I introduce this activity, I will not answer. So how do you make this interactive? Maybe you need to find a different, I don't know, measurement that is just instead of asking long answer questions, okay, how do we make this into a system? Or maybe give an incentive of filling in the form, or say, okay, the person who feels, gives the most constructive feedback will get to, I don't know, present in the next meeting, or something that is valuable to them. So you can also gamify feedback, and then that is much more effective than just say, okay, this is the form, I expect everyone to complete it just because it's important to me, that I feel like this is also important for you. It doesn't work.
Yeah, that's what, when I receive these forms, I'm like, no, skip, next. I've got so much other stuff, so much other admin to be doing. So you're absolutely right. So like, if being intentional about gamification, right, even to the end, like don't skip a beat. I'm just curious as well from your own perspective, because you're doing it as consulting, right? So you're helping companies externally, but also currently internally, right? Just curious, have you found a difference between like how easy it is? Like, is it easier to do it corporate, like internally, or is it easier to advise as an external person to companies?
I think it really depends on the company itself. For me, for example, because being part of a company is easier because you know the audience that you are interacting with. So, for example, in my own company, I know that, I don't know, the training team is part of my team. So I know the people, I know that it will be much more open to, I don't know, do a sing-along song with me than if I go to a different department that doesn't really know me and is not really familiar with what I'm doing or what I want to do. So I think the advantage that you have if you do this internally is that you have much more information. Doing this externally, you can also still get some information. So I also, for example, ask my contact person, okay, tell me more about this team. How long have they been in the organization? What are their reporting lines? Who works closer with whom? And other like standard information. But because my approach is not very one size fits all or a very perfected structured script, I also don't need that much information about the group itself, how they behave, how they react, because I always adapt on the spot to the approach. And I think that for me, that takes a lot of experience because I've been part of these groups. So I know the personas that I will find and I know how to deal with those people. And I also have a lot of ideas about activities because I have these ideas already been tested out. So I don't expect that everybody will feel the same level of comfort that if they don't know someone or if they don't know a group. So my advice is always like start small, gain more experience, and then be exposed to these different situations. Maybe start from your own team that you know people, but also, for example, even if you know someone, maybe a situation is unexpected. So if you land on your feet, okay, then you have a learning and then you can apply it to the next one. So I think for me it's very much more challenging to do this externally, but it's also much more impactful because I really like the unexpected and then that helps me grow. And because I'm such a person of believer of I'm always wanting to find a better version of myself, that also challenges me and my learning further. But internally is also something that is also valuable because then people know you, you get much more interaction with other teams because the word of mouth gets out there that, oh, Amy is doing this, so maybe they can do it for their own teams.
Yeah.
So I think there's pros and cons to both situations.
Can we just shout out Rituals as well, because they're allowing you to pursue your own dreams, your own freelancing dream, and work for them as well. So they're so flexible. Kudos.
Definitely. I think it was really something that I was really thinking before joining. And I was like, okay, this is the best case scenario if I can work part-time to a company, but also have one day a week to dedicate to my venture, which was something super risky and daunting for me because I've never done it before. But I'm really lucky to find an employer that not only supports me in this venture, but also allows me to express my strengths within the organization itself.
Did you ask this during your interviewing process then, if you were allowed to?
Yeah, so during the offer stage, I did ask about it if it's flexible because before I wasn't really sure if I wanted to pursue it. But once it got to the offer stage, I was like, okay, I will just try it out. I'm not sure if they are open to it. And then going into the organization, I felt really safe to really express, okay, these are my strengths. These are the things I like. It might be outside of my role, but I really like to be doing this. And then it's just started, I think, with one energizer in one team meeting. And then it just sort of like happened that in every event now the energizers are there because people see the effect, and then once they see the effect, I'm like, okay, now we need you in this group, and then in this group, and in this event. I'm like, okay, I'm just up for anything. Please include me.
But that's a benefit for them, right? Because you're getting research, you're working with other companies, you're learning new skills, so you're developing as a professional much quicker than if you were just doing this 9 to 5, 5 days a week, right? So they're actually benefiting as much as you are doing your adventure as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what's been the most challenging part about starting a business?
I think something that I found being very challenging is to keep the momentum going, because in the beginning everything is fresh and new, and you want to create your own website, and you want to reach out to companies, and you want to talk about your messaging. I think the hardest part have been to keep it going while also working part-time, and also having the stress and the projects going on your regular job, and then finding this one day a week where you just want to relax, but also you want to work on your projects, and you want to reach out to more clients. So I think keeping the motivation going has been quite harder than I expected. But in that sense, I think also having someone to keep you accountable, or to have a sparring partner to discuss about things, or give you new ideas, or have conversations that can lead you to aha moments. Like, for example, oh, I can tell her this to my website, or I can do this in my next approach. Can be a quick solution to this. And the second challenge, I think, is also how do you get your message across? Because what I've recently found out is that for me, it's just so important, and I see the value of gamification, but it's also difficult to translate that message to what my audience needs to hear. So it doesn't mean that, for example, if I see the benefits of team building, everybody else will. So how can I present my message in a way that is also true to myself, but also relevant to my audience? And I think that's part of my journey in the next months, like also understanding what people want to see, what people want to experience, and if my use case is strong enough to persuade people to come to me, because I don't have a rich experience. I don't have 20 years behind me. I don't have, the financial means to really invest into making this really cool website or to hire more people. So I'm just really winging it on my own. So I think I'm also treating this as a learning journey for myself. Like, how do you navigate through the challenges of entrepreneurship while also doing this for just one day a week? But I welcome it with really openness and positivity. And I'm like, okay, I don't have much to lose. I have everything to gain.
Yeah, you just need to be really, really passionate about the role itself that you're doing. But that's what's not talked about with entrepreneurship. The fact that you are an entire mini business on your own. You're not just a consultant offering your services, but you're also in sales because you have to acquire the clients. You're also marketing. You're also a content creator. Like, there's so many elements to it. Sometimes you're a website developer if you actually want to pick that up. They're all roles, and you have to just learn as you create a business, right? Like you said, understanding your audience, because you might love this. You think, okay, everyone needs to know about this, but how? Like, how do you communicate to not people just like you, but everyone, right, about the idea? How long have you been in the Netherlands?
This is my 6th year.
6th year, yeah. So you've built a network here as well to push the idea out on.
Exactly.
And so you've got a website, and I'm guessing you're pushing it out on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Well.
So I'm also trying, to build my website, to make a subscription list, to create content so that my subscribers also get value from what I'm doing, to build a name for myself by sharing my ideas, by sharing handbooks, for example, that I have created, but also learning, okay, how do I sell? Because I think that's the part that comes the hardest on me. I'm not the natural extroverted, sociable person. So I think that comes with something that I've learned to do. And it helps with the fact that I'm really passionate to what I'm doing. And just to share the ideas is something that I really like. So I try to catch from that and to push myself to reach out to strangers, reach out to leads, or tap into my network to say, hey, I see that you're working in this company. Maybe this would be useful for you. So I think it's just a step-by-step process that I take one day at a time.
Yeah, and there's two ways of selling. I mean, I think Jamie's probably listening to this. Like, I totally relate. He also works part-time and then works on the podcast and video production on the side. So we totally relate that you want to relax on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, but you just can't because you're building what's going to be your future. So it's really, really intense. I don't think people understand it from the outside either. I was going to ask you because obviously I heard about gamification through you. You introduced me to it. So I'm sure a lot of people are also discovering this through this podcast as well. It sounds like a really fun, engaging and rewarding profession, right? How could I, as a HR professional or, for example, not in the profession, get into gamification and start my own business? What was your background?
Yeah, I think it can be in from any, trajectories of life, because I like to see myself not as a gamification expert, but more of as a facilitator. So being a facilitator means that you can lead a group towards a task without being an expert necessarily yourself. It helps if you know a few things, but even if you know which tools you can use and which activities you can leverage to get to this intended outcome, then you can do it. So I don't think that you need to have any sort of background, as long as you're curious, as long as you know which places to look at for resources. There's a million, websites with icebreakers and energizers and fun games to play in person and virtually. Like, I don't expect that the games that I play, I didn't create them. I just found them, or I just tailor them to what I want to do. So starting from this vast area of information in the internet can really help. And then it helps with just starting out and test it to smaller teams and environments and see what works and what doesn't. And then also to challenge yourself to be out there. Like, how do you lead a group? I think also being a manager or leading a team is a natural way to test those things out. But you don't have to be a manager. You just have to be part of a team and be willing to take the plunge and just say, you know what, I'm just going to swim in this deep sea without really knowing what I'm doing, but I'm having trust in the tools that I have discovered that I want to try. So just it takes one step for you to try. And then also with experience, you also understand how to read people, how to read a room, how to channel the energy of the group to what you want to do it. Do you want it to be higher? Do you want it to be lower? Do you want to engage discussions? Do you want to resolve conflict? So it really comes with experience. So I would say to anybody, you just need to start, and you don't have to worry about having, a rich background of gamification, because also gamification, I don't think it's just something that people really become specialist in. It's just a sort of way of working, and people just need to try. And if you need help with starting, then you can also address your questions to another facilitator out there or another organization that does this kind of things to help you get the ball rolling. And then afterwards you can just pick the ball and then play with yourself.
Yeah. And I guess I'm just thinking, if I was like a grad looking to break into the industry or try this out, I guess a psychology study or a business management study could be quite useful, right? You can really implement the stuff you've learned to pursue this, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it can be that you have learned about group dynamics in your studies. It can be that because you read a book, like myself, for example. My studies are in economics, and then I did my master's in human resource management, but none of these degrees actually equipped me with facilitation or how to work with a group. It just sort of came naturally because I was part of a group and I was working with it. So learning by doing, I think, is the most easy way to do this. But if you feel like, you want to start from a higher step, then of course businesses and industries or studies that relate to people in any sort of way of how to interact with people, how to engage, and how group dynamics work and how our brain works, or how do we learn, this of course helps. Yeah.
So you mentioned previously you have a website, right? So is that the best way to contact you, or also on LinkedIn as
Yes, I
well?
think LinkedIn is, of course, the most easy way to contact me. But also my website is also live. It's called Teamifyed, so it's like team and gamify, and in a nice wordplay. So Teamifyed.com is where people can see my approach, my services, my bio, my background, and also some blog articles about the stuff that I have been doing with other companies if they want to get some inspiration. But if they're just curious, just drop me a line on LinkedIn, and I will also answer any questions that they might have.
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to check out your website. I'm super curious. Emy, thank you so much for passing by. I've learned a lot. I'm sure the audience has learned a lot as well today. Thank you so much for explaining everything about gamification.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.